Hey guys, tonight we slip back into a soot-choked world where fortunes gush from the earth, and men gamble their lives in muddy oil fields while wearing boots that barely hold together. You're about to wander through grimy boom towns, sweat through 10-hour refinery shifts, and hear the grumble of oil barrels clanking like thunder across wooden docks. This isn't a world of soft handshakes and polite capitalism. This is where the American industrial juggernaut really gets its first taste of dominance. And spoiler, you probably won't survive this without a few chemical burns and a permanent cough. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Are you falling asleep in Lagos or trying to unwind in Toronto? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off the creaking train in a place that smells like scorched metal and ambition. It's 1867. You're in Titusville, Pennsylvania, ground zero for the oil rush. Around you, the town buzzes like a kicked beehive. Men yelling over clattering carts, steam whistles screeching from distant boilers, and the deep, irregular thrum of pumps sucking black gold from the earth. Mud cakes your boots instantly. The streets aren't paved. They're a mosaic of wagon ruts, spilled kerosene, and discarded dreams. You can barely move without brushing shoulders with someone who smells like sweat, tobacco, and lamp oil. The men here don't just walk, they stomp. Swagger. Every one of them is convinced they'll strike it rich by next Tuesday. But most won't even strike water. Boom towns like this one, brash, loud, and filthy, are sprouting like fungus across the Pennsylvania hills. A wooden shack down the street serves as a saloon, a rooming house, and a place where claims are bought, sold, and fought over with fists or knives. You duck inside to escape the cold wind. Inside, it's darker than a coal bin. Someone's fiddling with a crude oil lamp, coughing as it sputters acrid smoke into the room. The floor is sticky. The mood is desperate. You overhear a whispered conversation. Two wildcatters, independent drillers, are pooling money for one last go. They've named their rig Widowmaker. You do your best not to make eye contact. Outside again, a derrick groans under the pressure of an oil well just starting to flow. You'd think the sound would be triumphant. It's not. It's more like a death rattle. The equipment is patched together with spit and rust. Nearby, a child no older than 8 is rolling an oil barrel for 5 cents a day. His arms tremble with the effort. This is the part no one mentions in the success stories. How many hands, tiny and calloused, keep the oil flowing? Historians still argue whether these early boom towns helped democratize wealth or simply concentrated it faster than gold ever could. What's not debated? The environmental catastrophe. Crude oil pools and open pits. Water sources stink. A single spark can turn a whole street into a fireball. Yet the air thrums with opportunity. It smells awful, but it smells like money. And here, where oil flows freely, it's not long before whispers of a young man named Rockefeller begin circling. You first hear the name at the rail depot. A grizzled teamster mutters it while unloading barrels. That Rockefeller fella's buying up more rail space, fixing to squeeze us out. You file it away, not knowing that in a few short years, that name won't just be spoken, it'll be feared. By 1870, the chaos of the oil rush is already starting to congeal. You hop a train to Cleveland, Ohio, a city choking on ambition and refinery smoke. This is where John D. Rockefeller will launch something no one else dared. An empire that eats other empires. But right now, it's still just Cleveland, full of clerks, barrels, and suspicion. You arrive at night. Gas lamps flicker like ghosts over wet cobblestones. The air hums with refinery noise, the clang of iron, the hiss of steam valves, and that unmistakable tang of kerosene. You follow it to a small building tucked between warehouses. There, a bookish man with thinning hair and sharp eyes is double-checking ledgers under the lamplight. He's maybe in his early 30s. No entourage, no bodyguards, just columns of numbers and that intense, quiet frown. That's Rockefeller. You're invisible to him, just another poor soul passing through. But he notices everything. He always does. It's how he'll win. For now, he's focused on the math. Barrels in, barrels out. Losses, waste, efficiency. That word, efficiency, he'll say it like a prayer. Meanwhile, back in the oil fields, no one's praying. You return to Pennsylvania weeks later to find whole towns emptied. Rigs abandoned. Well's gone dry. The frenzy is cooled, but the smoke still hangs in the air. Oil didn't vanish. It just got redirected. To Rockefeller. He doesn't drill. He doesn't refine. Not personally, anyway. What he does is see the chessboard too moves ahead. While others bicker over land rights and labor costs, he's negotiating discounts with railroads. Under-the-table rebates that let him ship oil cheaper than anyone else. So much cheaper, in fact, that competitors can't stay in business. And here's the kicker. Most of them still don't even know they've lost. You try to imagine what it must feel like to be an oil driller who wakes up one morning and realizes the price you need to break even is higher than the price Rockefeller charges to ship oil halfway across the country. It's like running a lemonade stand and finding out someone else is selling lemonade, shipping it from 3 states away and still undercutting your price. You'd panic, and they do. In one busted-out Pennsylvania town, a former driller rants at the general store. He's drunk, bitter, and very loud. That snake got the railroads, got the banks. Soon he'll own the churches and the graveyards too. You smirk, but you also keep your distance. He's not entirely wrong. And yet, beneath the fear and the fumes, there's a kind of magic to it all. The way oil has reshaped every corner of life. Houses glow with kerosene lamps. Factories extend their hours. Cities pulse with new life. You even catch wind of a bizarre little contraption out west. A horseless carriage powered by gasoline. Sounds ridiculous. One day it won't. But for now, your shirt is soaked with sweat. Your boots are ruined. Your lungs ache. You've seen what it takes to bring oil to market. And somewhere in Cleveland, Rockefeller is counting the profits with ink-stained hands and an expression like cold granite. He didn't invent oil. He didn't discover it. But he will own it. And if you stay in this business, you'll either work for him or you'll disappear. You wake in a rented room above a Cleveland boarding house, your lungs still raw from refinery air. The mattress sags in the middle like a broken promise. Through the thin walls, you hear the coughs of other men. Clerks, oil traders, a retired engineer who mutters numbers in his sleep. No one gets a full night's rest here. Not when Standard Oil is buying. Downstairs in the dim morning light, you sip weak coffee and overhear the housekeeper gossiping with the cook. They say young Mr. Rockefeller hasn't taken a vacation in 10 years. You nearly laugh. He doesn't seem like the vacation type. Outside, the city churns with ambition. Cleveland in the 1860s isn't the glittering urban sprawl you're picturing. It's damp brick buildings, smoke-choked alleys, and the ever-present screech of rail cars. Oil wagons clatter by, splashing brown sludge onto sidewalks. You watch as a boy, no older than 10, runs after one, waving an invoice in one hand, his shoes completely soaked in rainwater and old kerosene. This is where the empire begins, with ledgers, leaky barrels, and a near-religious devotion to arithmetic. You follow the smoke trail to 37 and 39 River Street, Rockefeller's first headquarters, though headquarters is generous. It's a modest 2-story building, barely different from the shipping depots beside it. Inside, you find rows of wooden desks, stacks of papers, and men in dark suits hunched over numbers like medieval monks copying scripture. And there, in the back, is John D. himself. Not much to look at. Tallish, thin, pale. He wears a beard trimmed so tightly it looks like an afterthought. His voice is calm, almost gentle, but his eyes, they pierce through you. You settle in, invisible again, just another fly on the soot-covered wall. Rockefeller moves through the office with quiet certainty, sleeves rolled neatly to the elbows, calculating not only prices but the psychology of everyone around him. He's already been in the oil business for 5 years. He's already noticed how sloppy it is. Too many barrels, he says softly to no one in particular. Too much waste. Too many fools swinging hammers without purpose. This is his genius. He doesn't just want to sell oil. He wants to fix it. You glance around. Everyone here believes him. Rockefeller starts each morning reviewing what he calls the cost per gallon of finished product. That sounds boring, until you realize he can tell exactly which part of the supply chain leaked 2 cents on a Tuesday and which refinery manager ordered too much sulfuric acid. You've never seen a man so obsessed with fractions. But here's the kicker. He's not flashy about it. He walks to work, eats plain food, doesn't drink, smoke, or gamble. One of his clerks once joked that John D. Rockefeller could balance a ledger on the back of a galloping horse. Another claimed he read invoices the way priests read scripture, except Rockefeller understood all the footnotes. Historians still argue whether Rockefeller was a ruthless monopolist or a misunderstood efficiency savant. The truth is probably both and neither. Right now, he's just a man working late by lamplight, figuring out how to bottle the future and label it standard. His first company, Andrews, Clark & Company, already refines oil at a small scale. But that won't last. By 1870, Rockefeller reorganizes everything into the new Standard Oil Company, with his brother William, some close associates, and a few quiet backers for New York. The mission is simple. Control the industry by making their product cheaper, better, and everywhere. You're standing in the room when he outlines the strategy to his inner circle. Focus on refining, not drilling. Let other people risk their necks punching holes in the ground. Standard will focus on efficiency, quality, and distribution. And we buy out anyone who resists, he adds, so casually it's almost poetic. One partner clears his throat, and if they won't sell, Rockefeller smiles, a slow, tight smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Then we make it impossible not to. In that moment, you see the shift. This isn't just business. It's chess with real-world stakes. While others swing picks and argue over wells, Rockefeller is quietly purchasing tank cars, negotiating discounts, and securing warehouse space in every major city. You hitch a ride with one of his rail clerks to the Erie yards. There, you witness what truly separates Standard from the rabble: organization. Trainloads of barrels arrive on time, stacked perfectly. Workers offload them like clockwork. Even the labels are uniform. Kerosene from Standard Oil looks clean, trustworthy, safe. It's not just branding, it's belief. Rockefeller believes in method, and he knows the public will too. Still, not everything is sanitized. Out at the refineries, things are messy. You visit the Kingsbury Run facility, one of Rockefeller's earliest. It sits in a valley thick with smoke and chemical stink. The workers here are mostly recent immigrants, sweating through long shifts as acid fumes sting their eyes. There's no safety gear. One slip and you're blind, or worse. A laborer explains the muck room, where residue from the refining process accumulates. Workers shovel it by hand, wearing handkerchiefs over their mouths. They call it black snow. Quirky tidbit: some of this sludge was used experimentally in hair tonics. Yes, people literally rubbed oil residue into their scalps. The Victorian era was adventurous. Back at headquarters, Rockefeller is developing what he calls the rebate system. On the surface, it's brilliant. If Standard ships enough oil, the railroads give them a discount. But behind closed doors, it's more sinister. These rebates aren't just about saving money. They're about destroying competitors. Because here's the trick: Standard gets secret drawbacks, too. For every barrel a rival ships, Rockefeller gets money back. Imagine opening a bakery and discovering your competitor not only sells cheaper bread, but gets paid every time you bake yours. That's what this is. And the railroads? They can't afford to say no. Standard moves so much oil, Losing their contract would be economic suicide. You attend one of the early railroad meetings, skulking in a corner. The execs don't look thrilled, but they sign. They always do. Soon, word spreads. Small refiners in Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and Buffalo wake up to find their rail costs doubled. Some close within weeks. Others try to fight. Most end up swallowed whole, acquired by Standard at pennies on the dollar. And what does Rockefeller call this? He calls it integration. Vertical, horizontal, diagonal. If there's a way to absorb your business, he'll find it. There's a dark humor to it. The man gives to Sunday school, tithes religiously, and funds the local temperance league. Meanwhile, he's quietly kneecapping every competitor with a velvet-gloved handshake. You spend your nights now in the cheap lodgings near the Cuyahoga River, listening to the muffled sobs of men who once owned oil companies and now sweep floors. One night, a former driller curses the Standard logo on a kerosene can. That blasted eagle, he spits, used to mean freedom. Now it means you work for him or not at all. And you're just trying to stay warm. The snow crunches beneath your boots as you step out into a Cleveland morning that smells like burned sulfur and ambition. The sky is gray, low, and heavy, almost like it's stooping to listen in on the business of the city. The chimneys along the river belch clouds so thick you can barely tell where the buildings end and the air begins. You pull your coat tighter, though it does little to stop the chill. You're on your way to meet someone who used to own something, a small refinery on the east side of town. Used to, until Rockefeller came knocking. Actually, that's not quite true. He never knocks. He sends letters. Soft-spoken associates. Friendly meetings with an offer and a handshake. Then suddenly, your business isn't yours anymore, and somehow you're supposed to feel thankful for it. This particular ex-owner's name is Thomas Clark. His office once bustled with contracts, clerks, and barrel orders. Now it's a silent shell with stacks of unsent invoices and an untouched typewriter collecting dust. He shows you a framed oil company certificate, his old pride, now just a decorative gravestone. He didn't threaten me, Clark says, chuckling bitterly. Didn't have to, just laid out the numbers. My costs, his prices, my shipping rate, his rebates. Told me I could keep playing David while he bought up all the slingshots. You nod, unsure what to say. This story isn't unique. It's repeating across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and New York like a virus. Buy out, undercut, absorb, repeat. You wonder if Rockefeller dreams in ledgers and train schedules. You head toward the river docks next, where the barrels are being loaded. The rhythm is hypnotic. Thud, roll, stack, lift. Standard oil barrels are stamped cleanly, uniformly. Even the cooper, the barrel maker, tells you how Rockefeller standardized the width of the barrel hoops to save on steel. That's the kind of detail you're learning to expect. And it's not just oil now. It's everything surrounding oil. Standard owns the coopers, the carting company, the storage yards, even the glue used to seal the labels. If something touches kerosene, Rockefeller probably owns it or is negotiating to own it. One of the dock workers leans close and mutters. They say he's starting to buy the brokers now. Pretty soon, we won't even know what a fair price is. You realize then, this isn't a business empire. It's a slow-moving glacier grinding down everything in its path. And Rockefeller? He's not roaring. He's humming softly as the world bends around him. Back in the city, at a dinner table inside a much warmer home, one of Rockefeller's closest business allies, Henry Flagler, is explaining a new idea. You're lucky to be invited to this gathering of moneyed men. You sit silent, a shadow at the end of the table, listening. Flagler's pitch is simple and terrifying. Instead of fighting 1,000 small wars with every refinery across the country, why not offer them all a way out? A deal, a payout, a place under the Standard Oil umbrella. Not a hostile takeover, a rational solution. The idea takes hold like fire in a dry forest. Over the following months, you watch it unfold like clockwork. One by one, independent refiners are approached. Some resist, and those usually vanish quickly from the market. Others accept the offer, sign the papers, and become part of the Standard family. Which, if you think about it, sounds like something out of a mob movie if they had movies back then. Quirky tidbit: Rockefeller allegedly kept a little black notebook labeled acquisitions. In it, he'd jot down the names of companies he wanted, how much they were worth, and when he expected to own them. He didn't often miss. By 1872, Standard Oil controls more than 25% of the nation's refining capacity. And that's just what people know about. Behind closed doors, the South Improvement Company scheme is brewing. A secret deal so bold, it's almost cartoonish. You hear the whispers at a rail station that Standard has struck a deal with major railroads to punish anyone who isn't part of their group. Not only would Standard get shipping rebates, but its rivals would be charged extra. Oh, and Standard would get secret reports on competitor shipments. Historians still argue whether Rockefeller truly masterminded the whole plan or whether the railroads pushed it forward with their own agendas. But what isn't debated is how devastating it could have been if it hadn't leaked. Because that's what happens. A disgruntled oil man in Pennsylvania catches wind of the deal and blows the whistle. The press gets involved. Farmers protest. Independent refiners form mobs and burn Rockefeller in effigy. You travel to Oil City to see one of these rallies. It's wild. Dozens of angry men waving signs, throwing torches onto barrels with Standard's name scorched on the side. One protester shouts, "Down with the octopus!" and you glance up to see a hand-painted banner of a giant black cephalopod wrapped around America's oil pipelines. It's funny in a dark way, and it sticks. From here on out, Rockefeller isn't just a man. He's a symbol. The octopus, the puppet master, the silent trust. In Cleveland, though, it's business as usual. Standard Oil issues a statement denying everything. Rockefeller himself stays quiet. Always calm, always polite. You catch a glimpse of him later that week, strolling past a newsboy hawking papers screaming about monopoly scandal. He doesn't flinch. A few weeks later, the South Improvement scheme collapses under public pressure. But the damage is done. Everyone now knows what Standard wants: control. Still, you've got to admire the strategy. While the world howls in outrage, Rockefeller simply pivots. He scraps the name, dissolves the old partnerships, and builds a new empire brick by brick. One company becomes 20. Paper trails vanish. Ownership shifts into the fog. What does Standard own now? Everything and nothing. It depends who's asking. You walk past a Standard Oil distribution warehouse one evening. It's silent, locked, dimly lit. But you know inside are row after row of gleaming barrels, stacked like gold bars in a vault. Waiting, you catch yourself wondering if Rockefeller ever sneaks down here at night, just to stand among them. And maybe he does. The train rattles beneath your feet, clattering its iron rhythm across the Ohio tracks. And as you lean back in your seat, staring at a blur of winter branches outside, you realize something. You're not just in the middle of an oil boom. You're in the middle of a takeover. Not a noisy, Wild West land grab with shouting men and pistols in saloons, but a quiet, systematic conquest conducted from behind ledgers and telegrams. You're headed east now. New York, the real battlefield. Cleveland might be Rockefeller's laboratory, but Manhattan is where the serious power resides. Railroads, financiers, and lawmakers. And if you're going to dominate a nation's oil supply, eventually you have to make your case in the city that prints the newspapers and pays the lobbyists. You arrive in Lower Manhattan just as dusk sets the skyline glowing gold, and find your way to 26 Broadway. It's not yet the sprawling, ornate Standard Oil building it will become, but already you feel its pull. Inside, clerks scurry under gaslight, telegraph wires tick like nervous insects, and the floorboards creak with deals in motion. You settle in one corner of an office that smells faintly of pipe smoke and paper ink. A map of the United States hangs behind the main desk, marked with pins and string. It's not a display, it's a strategy board. Each pin is a refinery, a warehouse, a transportation line. And most of those pins are already standards. But Rockefeller's not here. Instead, you meet the men he's placed to run the show in the East, the Inside Circle. William Rockefeller, John's brother, is the smooth-talking diplomat of the operation, charming where John is reserved. Then there's Henry H. Rogers, the schemer. Charles Pratt, the industrialist. Each man is brilliant in his own way, and none of them asks permission to win. You overhear them discussing shipping rates over dinner at Delmonico's, casually ordering duck à l'orange while dismantling the future of 24 independent refineries. They'll come around, Pratt mutters between bites. They always do. Historians still argue whether this group was a tightly bound cabal or a loose collection of opportunists orbiting John D.'s gravitational pull. Either way, they all know the playbook. Control transport, crush inefficiencies, and buy silence where needed. As you walk through the back streets of the financial district, past alleys lit by flickering lamps, you see signs for oil brokers, once proud, independent houses, now quietly acting as resellers of standard product. No fuss, just absorption. Even those who think they're free are working for Rockefeller. But New York isn't just a place for business. It's a place for image. And that's where things get a little strange. Because despite controlling millions, Rockefeller cultivates the persona of a humble bookkeeper. He's not out on the town like J.P. Morgan or throwing opulent parties like the Vanderbilts. No, John D. prefers plain clothes, home-cooked meals, and early bedtimes. You begin to suspect he might not even enjoy money, except as a byproduct of control. Quirky tidbit, he reportedly carried around old, worn-down dimes and offered them to strangers he'd meet. Waiters, shoeshine boys, even wealthy businessmen, like little test tokens of thrift. Some found it charming. Others called it condescending. But for Rockefeller, it was almost a ritual. Back at 26 Broadway, you're sitting in on a meeting about expansion. They're targeting Chicago next, already a key rail hub. One executive suggests waiting a year, letting competition cool off. Rogers laughs. You don't wait to eat the turkey after it's run off the table. You find a phrase oddly perfect. That's how standard works. It waits patiently, then lunges fast and without remorse. You travel west again to Illinois by train. The ride is long and the scenery monotonous, but the destination? Electrifying. Chicago is everything New York isn't. Loud, chaotic, booming. All here is transported by horse cart, train, canal, and even bucket if you're desperate. Standard steps into this circus like a librarian entering a frat party, with quiet disdain and an armful of order. You watch as Standard builds a distribution network within weeks. Leased rail spurs, local offices, and bribes, consultation fees, to a few city officials. One day you pass a local refinery, still operating independently. A month later, it's shuttered. The owner? Rumored to be negotiating in Cleveland. You're starting to see a pattern, right? Standard doesn't outfight you. It outlasts you, outprices you, outlogics you. Everywhere you go, there are whispers. He's going to buy up the railroads next. They're talking about their own pipeline system. My supplier just switched to standard barrels. No notice, no explanation. And then there's the telegraph. If oil is the product and the railroad's the artery, then the telegraph is the brain. Rockefeller uses it obsessively. Daily rates, refinery output, regional prices, transportation costs. He wants it all reported by wire, fast and clean. You sit in one of Standard's telegraph rooms in Cleveland, where operators tap out strings of code like wizards whispering to metal. One young telegrapher tells you that Rockefeller sometimes sends personal instructions to multiple cities before noon. And if you ever delay a report, expect a letter with your full quarterly wages calculated to the halfpenny and a footnote reminding you of your exact role in the organization. There's a kind of grim comedy to it all. This empire runs on oil, but it's fueled by spreadsheets and guilt. Still, cracks are forming. You overhear a letter from Pennsylvania hinting at sabotage. A shipment delayed. A warehouse mysteriously burned. Rivals aren't just losing anymore. They're angry. And the press is catching on. Cartoons begin to appear in newspapers. Grotesque, exaggerated depictions of Rockefeller as a bloated spider or an oil-drenched king choking Lady Liberty with a pipeline. One evening you sit by a lamplight reading a front-page editorial screaming, "I.S. this the new American tyrant?" It's easy to laugh, but the paranoia is real. Rivals and journalists both begin calling for government action. You pass a courthouse in Washington where a small group of protesters is chanting, "Break the trust." You wonder if Rockefeller is worried. But when you finally catch sight of him again, back in Cleveland, walking with his daughter through a public park, he's calm as ever. Pale hat, slow stride, quiet voice. He stops to admire a bird in a tree, hands his daughter a flower, and you think to yourself, this man controls more wealth than most European nations, and he still carries crackers in his coat pocket for pigeons. You're walking now through the rolling hills of western Pennsylvania, your boots coated in a slick sheen of mud and oil. This is where it all began, not in boardrooms or grand city towers, but in the forested valleys of Titusville, where in 1859, Edwin Drake drilled the first commercial oil well. The land smells sharp, like tar and wet wood, and the ground squelches underfoot, riddled with craters where boomtowns sprang up like mushrooms after rain. Drake's well was the original spark, sure, but you're not here for nostalgia. You're here to see what's left. And frankly, it's not much. The boom ended fast. One town after another. Pithole, Boomtown, Oil Creek. Each exploded with activity and then collapsed into poverty when the gushers ran dry or prices crashed. But a few refineries still cling on, run by grizzled old-timers with soot-streaked faces and stubborn hearts. You pass a rusted-out derrick leaning like an old man against the wind. A dog barks nearby, and then you meet Samuel, white-bearded, glass-eyed, and completely unbothered by your presence. Rockefeller, he spits. That snake's never laid hands on this plot, and I'll die before he does. You believe him, but also, you know how this story usually ends. Because Standard Oil has already pushed deep into Pennsylvania, and the last independents are on borrowed time. Rockefeller's rail deals allow his oil to ship at half the cost. His buyers pay less. His product is cleaner. And when that isn't enough, he just lowers the price until your profit margin is so thin you can cut your fingers on it. One historian later called it predatory pricing. Another called it brilliant efficiency. And others? They still argue whether it was capitalism at its finest or a corporate version of bloodletting. You trudge past a company general store near Oil City, where Standard employees buy soap, lanterns, and biscuits. Prices are cheap, but you notice something odd. The workers don't handle money. They use company script, little paper vouchers redeemable only inside the Standard system. It feels closed, like a world inside a world. Later, a refinery manager explains it to you. It's easier this way. Keeps everything inside the trust. The trust. That's the word you keep hearing. It sounds so warm, doesn't it? Like friendship, loyalty, a secret between pals. But this is no pinky swear playground club. It's a legal fortress. You attend a late-night meeting in a Cleveland law office. Lamplight low, brandy on the table, papers spread like war maps. Rockefeller isn't there, but his shadow certainly is. The lawyer speaks softly, confidently. The trust consolidates assets, centralizes decision-making, and maintains legal separation between the parts. Translation: one hand moves the chess pieces, while the others pretend they've never met. The Standard Oil Trust, formally created in 1882, is a masterstroke. It binds over 40 companies, refining, transporting, distributing, into a single coordinated machine. On paper, they're separate. In practice, they march to one drumbeat, and Rockefeller holds a stick. You examine one of the trust agreements. The language is dense, coiled like a rattlesnake in legalese. But the core is clear. Shareholders hand over control to 9 trustees. Trustees make the decisions. Guess who's at the top? Quirky tidbit. Legend has it Rockefeller once described the trust as a perfectly coordinated army. Not exactly bedtime language, but hey, it works. You head back into the hills to see what that army is up to. And what it's up to is pipelines. Not content with railroad deals, Rockefeller begins building his own network of underground veins. They stretch across Pennsylvania like arteries, bypassing traditional railroads and cutting costs even further. You walk beside one under construction, men digging and cursing, a trench carving its way through farmland like a scar. It's genius, of course, but not everyone sees it that way. Farmers sue. Railroad tycoons scream. Competitors cry foul. A few even try sabotage, cutting lines, plugging valves. But Standard just files more lawsuits, buys more land, and keeps digging. By the late 1880s, pipelines are everywhere. A rival operator tells you bitterly, "It used to be we had 3 ways to move oil: barrels on wagons, rail cars, or our own backs. Now, it's their pipes or no way at all." And yet, there's something else growing here, too. A resistance. In Titusville, a printer named Robert H. McGee runs a small newspaper. He's wiry, intense, always ink-stained. He prints stories of refinery closures, worker exploitation, and rising prices despite falling costs. You can't beat him in the courts, he tells you, but maybe we can beat him in the press. You're not sure. After all, Rockefeller doesn't sue people. He buries them in paperwork until they vanish. He doesn't threaten them. He offers partnerships until your will erodes and you forget you ever wanted to fight. Still, some do. A few refiners in Pittsburgh form a cooperative, banding together to survive. They pool money, share rail costs, and vow not to sell the Standard. Their warehouse burns down 2 weeks later. No one can prove anything, but the message is clear. Historians still argue whether Rockefeller ever sanctioned aggressive tactics like sabotage or coercion. There's no paper trail, but there are plenty of ashes. You ride back to Cleveland with a kind of weight in your chest. The oil world is no longer the frantic gold rush of the 1860s. It's a machine now. Cold, efficient, unstoppable. And you realize something strange. It's not just that Rockefeller owns more oil. It's that he's made it impossible not to need him. He doesn't just sell kerosene. He controls the containers, the wagons, the barrels, the lamps, the routes, the warehouses, the advertising, the stores. Even the price itself. Like air, Standard Oil is invisible, but everywhere. You arrive back in the city just in time to hear Rockefeller giving a rare public comment. It's a speech to a church group of all places. He stands at a pulpit, hands folded, voice gentle. "I believe God gave me money to use wisely for the betterment of mankind." You watch the crowd nod. They love it. And to be fair, he does donate money. Schools, churches, a university or 2. His name is beginning to appear on the wings of hospitals. But then, after the speech, he walks past a group of unemployed refinery workers standing outside the fence. They're holding signs. One just says, "We built what he took." He doesn't look at them, just steps into his carriage. No fury, no fear, just a man who, in his own mind, believes he's doing something good. And maybe he is, but the oil keeps flowing, the trust keeps growing, and the world keeps spinning faster beneath your tired feet. You're standing now on the sun-baked wooden platform of a Texas depot, the scent of creosote and engine smoke lingering in the air. The 1890s have arrived like a thunderclap, and the southern plains are no longer the dusty backwater they once were. Oil has seeped south, and while Pennsylvania birthed the industry, Texas is the tempest waiting to be tamed. Standard's reach stretches this far now, not just by ambition, but by necessity. Demand for kerosene is still strong, but there's a new beast rising in the distance: gasoline. Automobiles, those noisy, awkward, finicky contraptions, are still a novelty, But you hear whispers in the saloons and workshops of Fort Worth. Someday, everything will run on it. You're not sure what to believe. Gasoline is mostly a waste product right now. Burn off or dump like trash. Kerosene still lights the world. But that's how all empires fall, isn't it? They ignore the joke product until the joke becomes the crown. Standard, though, isn't ignoring anything. It's watching. Quietly, carefully. You ride out to a new well being tested near Corsicana. It's crude, puny compared to the gushing fields of Pennsylvania, but promising. Men in overalls sweat and shout, cursing machinery that's clearly seen better days. A young engineer shows you a pipe and says with pride, "This'll be in Cleveland by next month." And you realize Standard isn't just invading. It's replicating its model down to the bolt. That's the real power. Not brute force, but franchise logic. Every territory runs like a miniature Cleveland. Same refining specs, same bookkeeping, same supply chains. Only the accents change. Quirky detail? One regional manager insists on painting all Standard barrels a particular shade of green, just because he read somewhere that it calms warehouse workers. You chuckle, but also, he's not wrong. The smoothness is unsettling. Like watching a machine hum along while human beings play catch-up. Even the local banks are beginning to structure their loans around Standard's delivery cycles. One clerk tells you, if they delay shipment, we don't just get late payments, we get foreclosures. Meanwhile, competitors are still trying to hang on. You visit a small refinery near San Antonio, an outfit run by a family with roots going back to the Mexican land grants. Their pride is palpable. Their payroll? Less so. We can't match their prices. The matriarch confesses, hands trembling slightly as she folds a ledger. But our oil is purer, more honest. She offers you coffee and cake, the kind hospitality you only get from someone clinging to both manners and survival. And then you see the letter, a notice from a transport company, effective next month. No more guaranteed freight west of Houston. No reason given. But you've seen that handwriting before, Standard behind the curtain again. Historians still argue whether this was strategy or coincidence. Did Standard pressure the lines to stop servicing its rivals? Or did the market simply shift around the trust's gravitational pull? Either way, the result is the same. The little fish keep drying up on the banks. But it's not just small refiners now. It's politicians, lawyers, governors. You attend a political fundraiser in Austin. Bourbon flows. Jokes fly. But everyone knows which name not to insult too loudly. Rockefeller is far away, but his donations are right here. Infrastructure, sanitation programs, and public lighting, some of it paid for quietly with Standard dollars. The press picks it up, of course. Editorials begin to echo through the South. Is our democracy for sale? Another paper asks. Who owns the rails, the oil, and the future? You'd think public anger would slow things down. But instead, Rockefeller shifts strategy. You see it happening in real time. Where once he moved in silence, now he begins to speak through proxies. Public relations wasn't a term yet. But make no mistake, this is early PR. A minister in Houston reads a sermon praising efficiency and stewardship in modern industry. A schoolteacher in Dallas receives a grant from a foundation that just happens to list Standard trustees on the board. A popular cartoonist gets a generous commission from a magazine that, curiously, has recently changed its stance on monopolies. And then there's the philanthropy. You visit a new hospital wing in New Orleans, built from bricks that still smell of fresh mortar. A bronze plaque reads, dedicated by a friend of public health. No name given, but everyone knows. The message is subtle but clear. Sure, we're powerful, but look what we're building. And honestly, some of it's beautiful. There's a library in Galveston stocked with leather-bound volumes, opened just months after a hurricane flattened half the city. The books were free. The reading was free. The lanterns that lit the rooms? You guessed it, Standard kerosene. You can't help but admire the efficiency, the sheer scale of it. But there's an undercurrent, something uneasy, Because every time something collapses, a competitor, a regulation, even a family-run refinery, Standard is already there to scoop up the ruins and make them cleaner, shinier, more obedient. You ride out again into the flatlands, the wind whipping across the open fields. In the distance, a single oil derrick stands against the setting sun, its silhouette stark and solemn. You climb to the top, not far, but high enough to see what's coming. Pipelines, more derricks, a web of control, and beyond it, the faint hum of machines not yet born. Because something is shifting. Horses still pull wagons, but you see a strange contraption sputtering down a dirt road. A horseless carriage, wheezing and coughing but moving nonetheless. One young engineer grins at it and says that thing runs on gas, not kerosene. You nod, and that's the moment you realize Rockefeller's oil monopoly might rule the present. But the future? It's on wheels. The year is 1900, and you're watching a new century crack open like a fresh egg, still steaming and full of promise, and maybe just a little bit rotten inside. Everything feels bigger now. Bigger cities, bigger fortunes, bigger problems. But nowhere is that bigness more obvious than in the steel and glass corridors of Manhattan, where Standard Oil has quietly rooted itself into the marrow of American capitalism. You're standing in the lobby of 26 Broadway, a polished stone colossus in the heart of New York's financial district. It isn't flashy, Standard never is, but it radiates calm authority. The walls don't shout, they whisper, and the whispers say, "You can't do anything in this country without passing through us." Inside, clerks scurry like well-fed ants. Every desk has a telephone. Every hallway leads to another hallway. You catch sight of the boardroom door, oak, thick, glossy, and behind it, the empire ticks like a Swiss watch. John D. Rockefeller no longer runs the Daily Show. He's retreated from the spotlight, a quiet king watching his kingdom from afar. His deputies now pull the levers. John D. Archbold, Henry Flagler, Charles Pratt. Names less famous, perhaps, but just as precise, just as calculating. Still, Rockefeller's fingerprints are everywhere. One executive tells you, Mr. Rockefeller once said, "I would rather earn 1% off 100 men's efforts than 100% off my own." He chuckles. So now we all work very hard for his 1%. And you feel it. That cold elegance. No one screams. No one bullies. The monopoly doesn't break kneecaps. It breaks balance sheets. You step into an office where rail tariffs are negotiated in decimals, where pipelines are routed with the delicacy of surgery. Standard doesn't just extract oil. It extracts time, compliance, margin. And it's here in these offices that you encounter one of the strangest Standard rituals, the cost letter. Every week, Standard companies across the nation send internal letters detailing costs, production totals, shipments, delays, prices. These aren't reports, they're surveillance. Each cost letter is logged, analyzed, charted. If one plant uses slightly more acid in the refining process than another, a memo is sent. If a refinery's workers take longer lunches, a quiet reshuffle. Every variable is watched. You sip tea with a clerk who jokes, "If I sneeze too loud, Cleveland hears it." Mainstream historical fact? Standard's internal data system was decades ahead of its time. Some business schools today still study its logistics models. And yet, amidst all this precision, people still push back. You attend a raucous town hall in Kansas where farmers rail against rising fuel prices. They say it's fair, one man shouts, "But my plow's rusting in the barn while their trains roll fat with kerosene." A woman holds up a jug of cloudy lamp oil, bought from a local vendor. They buy the good stuff, sell us what's left. And for once, you hear something new in the air. Not just complaint, but coordination. Reform is brewing. In Washington, murmurs ripple through the marble halls of Congress. Words like restraint of trade and public interest start appearing in speeches. And one voice grows louder than the rest. President Theodore Roosevelt. You see him from afar, speaking with that brash confidence that only Roosevelt can muster. "We welcome the man who makes a dollar," he declares. "But we must stand firm against those who use their dollars to choke off competition." Historians still argue whether Roosevelt truly hated monopolies or merely wanted to tame them. But one thing's certain, he is standard in his sights. Meanwhile, in the press, a bomb drops. You're in a printing house the day McClure's magazine rolls out a feature titled "The History of the Standard Oil Company," written by a tenacious journalist named Ida Tarbell. She's quiet, methodical, deadly. Her father, you learn, was once crushed by Standard's pricing schemes. And now, she's returning the favor. Page by page, she peels back the secrecy, the backroom deals, the pipeline bullying, the railroad rebates. Her prose is measured, never hysterical, but it cuts deep. Quirky tidbit: Tarbell reportedly kept a bust of Lincoln on her writing desk and lit a candle beside it while editing her chapters. Call it symbolic vengeance. You read through her work late into the night. And even though you've walked these roads, met these people, seen the gears of the monopoly turning, there's something chilling about seeing it laid bare. The nation responds with outrage. Letters pour in. Politicians wave copies on the House floor. And for the first time in a long while, you feel something shift in the wind. Back at Standard's headquarters, the mood is less than serene. The trust hires its own publicists, another first, to try and clean up the image. They issue statements, sponsor lectures, talk about fair play and service to the American people. But it's too late for polish. The cracks are showing, and the courts begin to stir. You follow the case as it moves through years of legal trench warfare. The U.S. government, armed with the Sherman Antitrust Act, accuses Standard Oil of monopolizing the petroleum industry. The defense? That it's just good business. Standard's lawyers argue they've lowered prices, increased quality, made the country safer. What crime, they ask, is there in efficiency? And yet, the prosecution pushes harder, shows the structure of the trust, reveals how directors serve multiple roles in competing firms, demonstrates how competitors were forced to sell or starve or vanish. You sit in the courtroom one gray morning in 1909 as the final arguments are made. On one side, suits polished to a sheen. On the other, the weight of the federal government. And hanging over everything, the question, is too much success a crime? Historians still debate the case's morality. Was Standard simply too good? Or did it cross the invisible line where business becomes domination? 2 years later, the verdict comes. Standard Oil is to be broken up, declared an illegal monopoly. Its 34 subsidiaries are to operate independently. A ruling that echoes through history like a dropped lantern in an oil warehouse. You're on the street the day the announcement hits. Crowds gather outside newspaper offices. Some cheer, others grumble. One old refinery worker just mutters, "Took him long enough." And far away, in his quiet estate in New York, John D. Rockefeller reportedly laughs. Why? Because by the time of the breakup, Standard's reach is already baked into the American economy. And when the companies split, shareholders, including Rockefeller, simply receive stock in all of them. The empire breaks apart, but the pieces, they still shine with Standard's light. You walk through a gas station in New Jersey, one of the first, and see the logo of a newly independent company, SO, short for SO, Standard Oil. You see another sign for Mobil, another for Chevron. Their new names, sure, but the roots? Still deep in Rockefeller's soil. The monopoly may be gone, but its legacy? It's just getting started. You're standing now at a crossroads, literally. The dust of the old monopoly still lingers in the air. But as the sun rises on the 1910s and 1920s, you start to notice something odd. Something familiar. The names have changed. The suits have changed. But the game? Oh, the game is very much the same. You walk into a gas station somewhere outside Cleveland. A big red sign towers above, ESSO, a rebranded echo of Esso Standard Oil. The pump attendant, with grease-stained hands and a friendly smirk, offers to clean your windshield. You ask him if he knows where the gasoline comes from. He shrugs. Some big company out east, I think. It's not ignorance. It's inheritance. The trust may be gone on paper, but its children, Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, Sohio, Amoco, are thriving. And if you're squinting hard enough, you realize these aren't children. They're clone fragments. You visit the offices of these new independents, and the layout is all too familiar. Same layered management, same regional silos, same whisper-quiet efficiency. In many cases, the same people. It's like watching a monopoly reincarnate, not as a single beast, but as a flock of coordinated birds, each flying a slightly different direction, but all from the same nest. Mainstream historical fact? After the 1911 breakup, Rockefeller's wealth nearly doubled as the successor companies surged in value. The market, it seems, didn't mind the breakup. It rewarded it. And you can see why. The old ways still work. They've just evolved. You meet a man named Walter Teagle, young, sharp, and freshly in charge of Standard Oil of New Jersey. He's Rockefeller's heir in spirit, if not in name, and he's pushing boundaries. It's a new world, he tells you over brandy, but oil is still king. You believe him, especially when he shows you the company's latest toy, a petrochemical research lab in New Jersey. Test tubes, Bunsen burners, and white coats. Oil isn't just for lighting or fuel anymore. It's plastic, dye, fertilizer, even medicine. Quirky tidbit: one early experiment aimed to create synthetic vanilla from oil byproducts. It sort of worked if you didn't mind a faint gasoline aftertaste. But it's not just about chemistry. It's about scale. The car, is taking over everything. You see Ford's assembly lines in Detroit pumping out Model Ts like they're loaves of bread. And each of those loaves needs gas. The demand for gasoline explodes. And with it, the demand for refining, for transport, for marketing, for branding. Yes, branding. Gone are the days when oil barrels were just barrels. Now, gasoline has a logo, a personality, a lifestyle. You drive through small-town America and see signs for Flying Red Horse, Mobil, the Chevron car saver, the proud blue and white shield of Standard of Indiana. You even pass a free map station labeled Compliments of Gulf. Gasoline isn't just fuel now. It's comfort, mobility, freedom. It's the American dream on four wheels. And the oil companies? They don't need to bully railroads anymore. They own the roads, figuratively, sometimes literally. Historians still argue whether these post-breakup companies acted independently or operated as a loose cartel. Prices often moved in uncanny synchronization. Territories seemed to divide cleanly. Was it coincidence? Or choreography? You ask a gas station manager in Illinois if he's noticed. All I know, he says with a wink, is that no matter who's selling, the price jumps the same day. You laugh, but not too hard, because even as gasoline becomes a staple, war is coming. And war needs oil like a fire needs kindling. You ride with a procurement officer during World War I. He's tasked with coordinating fuel for tanks, planes, trucks, vehicles that didn't even exist on the last battlefield. He says, this isn't just about bullets anymore. Without fuel, we're just standing targets. Standard Oil of New Jersey alone supplies over 80% of the Allies' wartime fuel. You watch convoys load drums into ships bound for Europe. You see maps with red lines tracing shipping routes and blue pins for U-boat attacks. Quirky but grim detail. During the war, some oil shipments were hidden beneath shipments of potatoes to avoid enemy detection. A floating oil and spud buffet for lurking submarines. After the war, the oil barons return home, not as tycoons, but as heroes. The government thanks them, publicly, lavishly, but there's a quiet unease. People remember Tarbell. They remember the trust busting. So the oil majors begin to soften their tone. Less about dominance, more about service. You read brochures titled, Our Responsibility to the Nation and Petroleum, the People's Partner. Some of it's honest. Some of it, you've seen smoother spin on a carousel. You visit a refinery tour in California. Glossy pamphlets, smiling guides, hard hats for the kids. The air smells vaguely metallic, but the story? The story smells sweet. We fuel progress, says the guide. We power freedom. And you can't deny it. You drive smoother roads, light brighter lamps, wear cheaper clothes, all because oil has become infrastructure. Even electricity bends to the will of petroleum. Power plants run on oil. Turbines burn it. And if you're in the right circles, you hear whispers about the future. Offshore drilling, synthetic fuels, aviation gasoline with terrifying octane. You sit in on a lecture at Yale, where an economist proclaims, in this new century, the measure of civilization may well be energy consumption. He's not wrong. But you wonder, who gets to consume? Who pays the cost? You travel down to Mexico and see oil fields under foreign flags. British, American, French. Local workers in torn shoes hauling buckets through mud while executives sip tea in hillside villas. In Tampico, you hear chants, El Petróleo es nuestro. The oil is ours. The pushback is beginning. Oil companies, now global in scale, start to notice. Some backpedal, others double down. And yet they're not worried. Not really, because the future still smells like gasoline. As the roaring 20s pick up pace, you return to New York. Neon lights flicker. Taxis honk. Jazz blares from an open window. You pass a theater marquee advertising the Black Gold Review, a song and dance tribute to the men who built the oil age, complete with top hats, fake derricks, and chorus girls in barrel-shaped skirts. It's absurd, and somehow accurate. You smile, because the monopoly may have dissolved. The power may have dispersed, but the system, it's still very much intact. You're sitting on a bench in the Texas heat. The year is 1930, and the air smells like dust, desperation, and crude oil. The Great Depression has sunk its claws into America, and even the almighty oil industry isn't immune. But unlike the crumbling banks and shuttered factories, the oil fields are erupting, literally. Welcome to the East Texas oil boom. You blink as the horizon rides with derricks, hundreds of them, rising like a metallic forest where cattle once grazed. Just months ago, this was sleepy farmland. Now it's a chaos of ambition. You watch a 14-year-old boy haul tools twice his weight. You sidestep a preacher handing out pamphlets by a saloon. A man in a three-piece suit trips over a barrel, cursing in 3 languages. Everyone wants in. Everyone smells riches. And oil is gushing out of the ground with such force that it floods past makeshift tanks and into ditches, creeks, some say even bathtubs. It's a gold rush, but black. You hear stories of men striking oil on their second try and becoming millionaires by morning, and others, just yards away, sinking every penny into a dry hole and collapsing into tears before sundown. And above it all, looming quiet as a ghost, is the Standard legacy. Because even here, in the rough and tumble chaos of wildcatters and fortune hunters, the Standard spawn, Exxon, Texaco, Gulf, are watching, calculating, waiting for the independents to burn out so they can swoop in, lease the land, and refine the spoils. Mainstream historical fact? The East Texas oil field became the largest petroleum deposit discovered at the time, producing over 5 billion barrels of oil across its lifetime. But with that size came another problem: glut. Oil prices nosedive. Drillers pump more to make up for it, which only makes it worse. You see towns hoarding unsellable barrels. Tanker trucks idle on roadsides like bloated beetles. At one point, oil becomes so worthless in Texas that producers offer it free, if you can haul it yourself. That's when you meet the Rangers. No, not the baseball team. The Texas Rangers. Armed, serious, and very interested in oil. You witness what has come to be known as the hot oil wars. The state imposes production limits, prorationing to stabilize prices. But many drillers ignore them, selling illegal hot oil under the table. You trail a state agent through a moonlit stakeout near Kilgore. His job? Catch smugglers sneaking oil across county lines. Feels like prohibition, he mutters, but the whiskey's flammable. Quirky tidbit: some smugglers disguise tanker trucks as milk delivery vehicles, complete with painted cows and slogans like "fresh from the udder." It would be hilarious if it weren't so combustible. Historians still argue whether the state's intervention was protection or cartel building. Did they save the market or set the stage for a tightly managed oil oligarchy? Either way, you can feel the industry reshaping itself. It's becoming cleaner, more professional, more corporate. You're invited to a Standard Oil of New Jersey board meeting. The room smells like cigars and polished walnut. Charts are unfurled. Pipelines are mapped. Risk assessments are debated in decimal places. You notice something curious. For supposedly broken up monopoly, the players seem oddly in sync. Coordinated shipping schedules, mirrored price shifts, friendly market-sharing agreements. Coincidence? You lean close to a secretary and whisper your suspicion. She smiles. They don't need to be one company anymore. They just play the same game by the same rules in different uniforms. You follow the oil trail overseas now, into Venezuela, Iran, Saudi Arabia. American and British companies are cutting deals with kings, sheiks, generals. The contracts are generous on paper, but tilted in practice. Local governments receive royalties, but the companies keep control. You stand in a shimmering desert and watch workers dig for pipelines under the beating sun, while foreign engineers sip lemonade in shaded tents. One young laborer looks up, wipes his brow, and mutters, "They call it our oil, but it never feels like ours." That unease grows. You hear it in Tehran cafes, in Caracas alleyways, in Basra mosques, a whisper rising, nationalization. But for now, the oil giants are still untouchable. In America, they've rebounded from the Depression, powered the New Deal, and are now riding high into the new decade. Back home, oil becomes the invisible backbone of life. Gas stations multiply along highways. Oil furnaces hum in basements. Roads are paved with asphalt made from residue once thrown away. You attend an ad agency meeting in Chicago, where a young copywriter pitches the slogan, "Put a tiger in your tank for Esso." People laugh, but the execs nod. Emotion sells, even for oil. And you realize the age of oil isn't just about fuel anymore. It's about feeling. You flip through Life magazine and see glamorous families gassing up before a vacation, their golden retriever grinning beside the pump. You pass a billboard with a smiling mobile Pegasus flying over sun-drenched highways. And then you see the bigger picture. It's not just petroleum anymore. It's petrochemical. You visit a plastics plant outside Pittsburgh. The air smells like melted Legos and solvent. Workers in goggles monitor vats bubbling with polyethylene and polystyrene. Household goods, toys, insulation, synthetic rubber. Even your shoelaces, oil made them all. And here's the kicker. Most of it's made from the leftover gunk that once clogged refinery pipes. Quirky fact, Bakelite, one of the first synthetic plastics, was accidentally discovered while trying to make a better shellac for electrical insulators. Nothing wasted. Everything monetized. That's the standard way. Rebranded, repackaged, resold. And yet, for all this efficiency, all this modernity, a question nags at you. What happens when the oil runs out? You sit in on a secretive energy summit in Washington. No press, no recordings, just oil execs, military officials, and a few anxious scientists. Charts flash across the screen showing global reserves. Predictions, projections, unknowns. One geologist stands up and clears his throat. "We have the resources," he says, "but the deeper we dig, the more it costs." He pauses, and some wells, they don't come back. You leave the summit unsettled. Outside, the sun is setting. You smell diesel in the wind. And for the first time, you wonder, Has the empire reached its peak? You wake to the buzz of the early 1940s, and the world is turned upside down again. The Second World War is in full swing, and oil has slipped from being a mere commercial commodity to a strategic weapon, more vital than any gun or tank. You find yourself in a bustling naval base somewhere along the Atlantic coast. The air is thick with salt, smoke, and the smell of fuel. Ships are being loaded, engines revving, and around you, men in uniform hustle with purpose. Every barrel, every drop of oil is meticulously accounted for. Here, you realize oil is life. Fuel supplies decide battles. A plane without gas is a sitting duck. A tank stuck without diesel is a target practice dummy. And a navy without oil is just a floating hotel. The United States government has taken direct control of oil production, distribution, and pricing. They created the Petroleum Administration for War, coordinating every drop to fuel the Allied war machine. You tag along with a logistics officer assigned to oversee pipeline construction through war-torn Europe and Asia. His maps are a tangled web of lines. Pipelines, railroads, convoys, all converging on critical fronts. He mutters, the longest supply chain in history. And every link's under fire. You marvel at the technical ingenuity. Pipeline mules disguised as cattle. Portable refineries built in the jungle. Even secret fuel caches hidden in plain sight, buried beneath cemeteries or hidden in barns. Quirky wartime tidbit, to hide fuel from enemy bombers. Some refineries built fake oil tanks made from wood and canvas, complete with painted shadows. Spoiler alert, they fooled exactly no one. But the stakes were that high. Every saved barrel meant a few more days, maybe weeks of fighting. Back home, oil companies cooperate closely with the government, sacrificing profits for the war effort, or so the public is told. Yet behind closed doors, executives carefully balance patriotism with preservation of their post-war market dominance. Historians still argue whether this cooperation was genuine sacrifice or strategic preservation. The war also accelerated innovation. Synthetic rubber made from petroleum was a game changer, replacing the cut-off supply from Asia. Jet fuel development pushed aviation technology to new heights. You sit in on an early jet engine test in Ohio. The roar is deafening. The smell? A potent mix of burning kerosene and adrenaline. By war's end, oil will have cemented its place as the world's indispensable resource. But it's not just about engines and explosives. The war also reshapes global oil politics. You travel to the Middle East and witness firsthand the beginning of a long, complicated dance between Western oil companies and emerging national governments. The old concessions and deals look fragile, cracks appearing beneath the surface. Local leaders, tired of foreign control, start to demand more rights, more revenue, more say. The seeds of future conflicts are planted here. You visit a small town in Saudi Arabia where American engineers live in isolated compounds, guarded and comfortable, while local workers endure harsh conditions for meager wages. A local shopkeeper whispers to you, the oil is ours, but the power is theirs. You feel the tension. It's a story repeated across continents. Oil as both blessing and curse. Back in the U.S., the post-war boom explodes. Suburban sprawl, highways, and the rise of the automobile culture create an insatiable thirst for gasoline. You drive a shiny new sedan down a freshly paved interstate. Windows down, radio humming. The air smells of hot tar, fresh-cut grass, and yes, gasoline. Your gas station attendant friend tells you, you could fill up twice a week if you wanted. That's progress. But as you watch the traffic jam ahead, you wonder, progress for whom? And what about the environment? The oil industry has grown so vast that its shadows stretch far, sometimes too far to see the edges. You attend an early environmental conference where a few voices caution about air pollution, water contamination, and health hazards from refining processes. They're the canaries in the coal mine. Few listen. One scientist holds up a sample of sludge from a local river near a refinery. "This isn't just dirt," she says quietly. "It's poison." The public remains largely unaware, distracted by the post-war optimism and consumer boom. Meanwhile, the oil companies continue their dance, balancing innovation, expansion, and public relations. Advertising evolves. Gasoline isn't just fuel anymore, it's identity. You see ads promising freedom, adventure, family time, all tied to the pump handle. The oil giants sponsor everything from baseball to science fairs, painting themselves as heroes of progress. And yet, behind the scenes, tensions simmer. Labor disputes erupt in refineries. Workers demand safer conditions, fair pay, and union rights. You sit with a refinery worker recounting a near-fatal explosion. "They told us it was just a little fire," he says, "but it felt like hell." Quirky fact: some refineries in this era used trained canaries to detect toxic gases. If the canary dropped dead, it was time to evacuate. Your heart tightens at the thought, but the oil empire marches on. Historians still argue whether post-war corporate strategies genuinely prioritized public welfare or were mostly about preserving power and profits. As you lay back that night, the hum of the fan mixes with distant highway noise. Somewhere, a car idles, its engine fueled by the legacy you've been tracing. You close your eyes, wondering what the next chapter holds. The 1950s unfold like a Technicolor dream, a decade bursting with optimism, fast cars, and even faster consumption. You step into this era feeling the pulse of a society hooked on oil's promises. The world looks shiny, new, and endlessly mobile. But underneath that glossy surface, you start to sense the subtle cracks forming in the empire. You begin your day at a sprawling new gas station on the edge of a burgeoning suburb. Neon signs buzz overhead, and the smell of gasoline mingles with the sweet scent of freshly mowed lawns and barbecue smoke drifting from nearby homes. It's a place of possibility, but also of excess. The oil companies have fully embraced the power of advertising by now. Billboards along the highway promise that filling your tank is the first step toward the American dream. "Put a tiger in your tank," still roars from radio commercials, and a mobile Pegasus gallops proudly on gas pumps. You notice how gasoline consumption is skyrocketing. The average American family now owns 2 cars, sometimes 3. The highways expand, the motels multiply, and drive-in theaters become cultural landmarks. But you catch whispers of darker side. A local school teacher tells you about the growing smog in cities like Los Angeles. People complain about coughing fits and blurred horizons. You hear that a mysterious Los Angeles smog has started to choke the skies on certain days. Scientists at the time are beginning to connect the dots. Emissions from cars and refineries are polluting the air. Quirky tidbit: the smog was so thick one day in 1954 that a pilot reportedly got lost over the city and had to land blind at an airport. The oil companies are aware, but largely dismissive. They fund studies that downplay the risks and highlight the benefits of progress. Historians still debate whether the industry's early responses to environmental concerns were sincere or a calculated strategy to delay regulation. Meanwhile, the petrochemical revolution expands rapidly. Plastics flood the market. Tupperware parties become a social ritual. Synthetic fibers replace natural ones in clothing. You visit a plastics factory where workers wear goggles and gloves as they handle strange, bubbling substances that will become everything from lunchboxes to car parts. Oil, once crude and messy, is now embedded in every aspect of modern life. You catch a glimpse of pop culture reflecting this shift. Futuristic homes with plastic furniture, lightweight appliances, and even cars boasting fiberglass bodies. The world feels limitless. But beneath this sheen, tensions are rising elsewhere. You find yourself in Oklahoma during the oil patch labor disputes. Miners and refinery workers push back against grueling hours and dangerous conditions. The phrase "company town" takes on a grim meaning when workers live under the thumb of oil bosses who control not just their jobs, but their homes, stores, and schools. One striking worker tells you, "We don't just drill oil. They're drilling into our lives." You visit a family where the father was injured in a refinery accident. The company offered little compensation, and the family struggles to get by. Quirky fact: in some oil towns, company stores would charge inflated prices, leaving workers perpetually in debt. A real-life oil trap. The growing concentration of power and wealth in oil magnates' hands creates social strains that simmer beneath the decade's prosperity. Internationally, the oil race accelerates. You travel to the Middle East, where American and British companies continue to dominate vast oil fields. But nationalist movements grow louder. You witness secret meetings where local leaders discuss how to wrest control from foreign firms. The politics are murky. Alliances fragile. Historians still argue about the true motives behind some of these early nationalist movements. Were they driven by economic justice, political independence, or Cold War dynamics? One thing is clear: oil is no longer just a business. It's a battleground. Back in the U.S., you attend a small conference where geologists discuss a scary possibility: peak oil. One geologist, a bit of a maverick, warns that U.S. oil production may soon reach its highest point and start to decline. His peers dismiss him as a doom-monger, but he insists the signs are there: fewer discoveries, declining well yields. You leave the meeting unsettled, the thought lingering in your mind. Could the oil empire's golden age be nearing its sunset? As you drift off to sleep that night, the distant rumble of cars and the faint hum of neon lights accompany your thoughts. Oil fuels your world, but at what cost? The 1960s arrive like a roaring wave, loud with change and drenched in gasoline fumes. You're thrust into a decade where the world's hunger for oil grows insatiable. But so does the awareness that this liquid gold might have a dark side. You start your day in a bustling American city, let's say Detroit, the beating heart of the auto industry. The streets pulse with muscle cars and station wagons, their engines growling as families pile in for Sunday drives. The smell of exhaust hangs heavy in the air, mixing with hot asphalt and the faint scent of old newspapers blowing down the sidewalk. At a local diner, you overhear conversations about the Great Society and dreams of space exploration. President Kennedy's moonshot looms large, and rockets fueled by refined petroleum promise to carry humanity beyond Earth's blue skies. But as you sip your coffee, your attention is drawn to a group of young activists discussing the silent spring of pesticides and the growing smog-choking cities like Los Angeles and New York. The environmental movement is waking up. You wander through the city streets and notice a new kind of poster, green and urgent, calling for clean air, water, and a break for the toxic fog. In 1962, Rachel Carson's Silent Spring rattles the nation. Her book warns of the devastating effects of pesticides, but it also opens eyes to the broader environmental costs of industrial progress. You chat with a scientist who shares that the chemical industry, powered by petroleum, is under increasing scrutiny. Quirky tidbit: in 1960, a famous public service announcement featured a talking turtle pleading for cleaner oceans, powered by oil-based plastics, no less. The oil industry pushes back, funding counter-studies and ad campaigns promising energy for a brighter tomorrow. Historians still argue whether the early environmental backlash was an honest public concern or a political front for other economic interests. Meanwhile, geopolitical tensions flare. The Cold War casts a long shadow over oil-rich regions. You find yourself in the Middle East again, this time in a desert tent filled with flickering lanterns and heated debates. Leaders discuss plans to assert control over their natural resources. The 1960s witnessed the rise of OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, which aims to coordinate policies and prices among oil-producing nations. You watch as Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, and others flex newfound economic muscle. The balance of power is shifting, but the oil giants don't go quietly. You visit an American oil executive's lavish office, where maps and graphs detail strategies to maintain dominance, securing new concessions, influencing governments, and shaping global markets. It's a chess game on a global scale, with every move rippling across economies and alliances. Back in the U.S., highways thicken, suburbs sprawl, and the car culture thrives. You take a drive along the newly minted interstate highway system, marveling at the engineering feat stretching thousands of miles. The freeway symbolizes freedom and progress, but also deepens dependence on oil. A quirky fact emerges. The U.S. government built this massive highway network partly for military defense, to quickly move troops and equipment across the country. So yes, your daily commute is secretly part of a Cold War strategy. But there are cracks in the veneer. In a smoky bar, a truck driver complains about rising fuel prices and the stress of constant road noise. A local mother voices concern about asthma rates climbing in her children. You hear whispers of political debates over energy policy, calls for conservation, diversification, and alternative sources. Still, oil's grip remains firm. At night, you lie awake listening to the distant hum of refineries and the occasional blare of sirens. You think back to that geologist's warning about peak oil and wonder if anyone is truly preparing for the day when the taps start to run dry. The decade ends with a sense of uneasy anticipation. Oil has brought unmatched prosperity, but also tangled the world in complex problems. And you're right in the middle of it. The dawn of the 1970s hits you like a sudden cold front, unexpected, disruptive, and far-reaching. The post-war boom seems to hit a speed bump, or more accurately, a giant oil barrel rolling downhill with no brakes. You find yourself glued to a black and white television in a modest living room, watching news reports of the 1973 oil embargo. It feels surreal. Countries once awash in cheap gas suddenly face lines at pumps, ration cards, and creeping anxiety. The Arab members of OPEC have imposed an embargo, slashing exports to the U.S. and other nations supporting Israel during the Yom Kippur War. You see Americans frantic to fill their tanks, waiting hours in scorching heat, clutching empty jerry cans. Gas stations run dry, prices soar. This moment shatters the illusion of endless oil abundance. You step into the shoes of an ordinary commuter, feeling the pangs of frustration and helplessness. Quirky detail: some drivers resorted to wearing sweaters indoors to conserve heating fuel, starting a brief but memorable sweater weather trend in offices. The crisis exposes deep vulnerabilities, not just economic but political. It triggers frantic government action, price controls, emergency reserves, and new energy policies aimed at reducing dependence. You sit through a tense White House briefing where advisors debate options: drilling in Alaska, investing in nuclear energy, promoting conservation. Yet the oil companies, while rattled, maneuver to protect their interests, lobbying fiercely to keep the status quo as much as possible. Historians still argue how much the companies influenced government policies during the crisis. Internationally, the embargo shifts power dramatically. Oil is no longer just a commodity. It's a weapon and a diplomatic lever. You travel to Riyadh, meeting diplomats who discuss the newfound confidence of oil-producing nations. They want respect, fair prices, and a say in their resources. This is the beginning of what some call the petropolitics era, where energy and diplomacy intertwine in complex, sometimes explosive ways. Back in the U.S., the energy crisis leads to new laws. You explore the creation of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, massive underground caverns storing millions of barrels for emergencies. You visit a gas station installing smaller pumps and see the birth of the 55 miles per hour speed limit, aimed at saving fuel. Amid all this, the industry faces scrutiny over environmental impact. You witness the 1969 Santa Barbara oil spill, black sludge coating beaches and killing wildlife. It's a shocking visual reminder that oil's costs aren't just political or economic, but profoundly ecological. Public outrage leads to the founding of the Environmental Protection Agency and the passage of the Clean Air Act. You listen to activists demanding change, knowing the oil giants will resist, but can't ignore the growing chorus. Quirky fact: in an odd twist, the 1970s saw a surge in interest in solar power and electric cars, ideas decades ahead of their time, but often mocked as impractical. You talk to an engineer tinkering with early electric vehicle prototypes, who smiles wistfully. We knew the future was electric, just a bit too early. The decade closes with oil prices wildly fluctuating and an energy landscape forever altered. You feel caught between nostalgia for the easy days and the urgent need to adapt. The shadow of scarcity looms. And yet, the world remains hooked. The 1980s roll in with big hair, neon lights, and a surprising twist: oil crashes. You wake up in this decade to find the towering Rockefeller-era empire facing one of its biggest shocks yet. The era of skyrocketing prices and OPEC's dominance suddenly gives way to a glut of oil and a price freefall that shakes economies and alters the global power map. You start your day scanning the financial pages of a newspaper. Headlines scream about the oil glut, and you see charts plunging like roller coasters. Prices that once seemed unshakable now bounce unpredictably. The Saudi government, previously the swing producer controlling supply to maintain prices, starts pumping aggressively to regain market share, flooding the world with oil. You find yourself in a Texas oil town where rig workers, once flush with cash, now face layoffs. The once bustling diner is quieter, faces more strained. A roughneck tells you, we're living proof that what goes up can come crashing down real fast. This crash is brutal, not just financially, but psychologically for a generation raised on oil's promise of endless growth. Quirky tidbit: during the crash, some gas stations started offering gas for song promotions, literally giving free gas if you could sing well enough to the cashier. Not exactly the future of fueling, but it lightened the mood. On the global stage, the crash triggers shifts in power. Some oil-exporting countries see their economies buckle, while others scramble to diversify. Venezuela, Nigeria, and Mexico feel the squeeze, and political unrest simmers. You hear debates among economists and historians who still argue whether this crash was a natural market correction or partly the result of deliberate strategies by certain players to regain dominance. Meanwhile, back in the U.S., the Reagan administration champions deregulation and a free market approach. Environmental regulations see rollbacks, and the oil industry basks in newfound optimism. Yet, the decade also witnesses growing awareness of oil's environmental toll. You visit a beach covered with tar balls, remnants of tanker spills. Wildlife conservationists rally to tighten maritime regulations, but enforcement is patchy. In a quirky intersection of culture and oil, the 1980s birthed the first wave of oil futures trading on financial markets, turning oil into a speculative asset beyond just a physical commodity. You spend an afternoon with a trader who compares oil futures to high-stakes poker, where bets on barrels can make or break fortunes in minutes. Amid this, technology advances quietly. Drilling techniques improve, allowing extraction from deeper, more challenging fields. Offshore platforms rise like futuristic islands in the sea, a testament to human ingenuity and stubborn dependence. You meet an engineer on an offshore rig who jokes, "We're drilling where even the fish are scared to go." But with all the technical progress, the fundamental question persists. Can the world sustain its thirst forever? The 1980s end with oil's dominance unquestioned but fragile, the grand monopoly evolving but facing new realities. You fall asleep pondering the irony. After decades of expanding empires and energy empires, the once invincible giant now wobbles on uncertain ground. The 1990s dawn with a quieter hum, but undercurrents of tension. You walk through a world adjusting to the post-Cold War order, yet still deeply dependent on the black gold flowing beneath its feet. The oil industry, though battered by the previous decade's turmoil, remains a backbone of the global economy. You find yourself at an international summit in Europe, where diplomats and oil executives gather in crisp suits, their conversations punctuated by the soft clinking of coffee cups and the occasional cough from jet lag. The topic: the role of oil in a rapidly globalizing world. The Soviet Union's collapse has thrown a wild card into the deck. Suddenly, huge new oil reserves in Russia and Central Asia become accessible, attracting the gaze of multinational corporations eager to stake claims. You're invited to a dusty oil field in Kazakhstan, where ancient pipelines rattle and new deals are inked under tent canopies. The local workers eye you cautiously, caught between hope for new jobs and fear of foreign exploitation. Quirky tidbit: the oil boom in some former Soviet states sparked a craze for luxury Western goods, leading to an odd sight: hard hat-wearing oil workers flaunting Gucci sunglasses and designer watches. Back in the States, you drive past sprawling refineries and notice a new buzzword in town: environmental responsibility. The 1990s see stronger moves toward cleaner fuel standards and pollution controls, though progress often feels like a slow dance with industry resistance. You chat with a chemical engineer experimenting with unleaded gasoline formulations, a shift away from the toxic lead additives of decades past. She jokes that it's like trying to bake a cake with fewer eggs and expecting the same fluffiness. Historians still debate whether these regulatory steps were genuine attempts to protect health or strategic moves to maintain oil's social license. The decade also brings increasing awareness of climate change. Scientists' warnings become harder to ignore, though they're often drowned out by political and economic inertia. You attend a lecture where a researcher lays out the greenhouse effect in simple terms: carbon dioxide trapping heat like a blanket around the planet. The room is half filled with skeptics, half with believers, the debate as heated as the topic. Meanwhile, the oil markets themselves grow more complex and interconnected. You visit a trading floor where screens flash prices, geopolitical news, and weather reports, all influencing the delicate balance of supply and demand. A trader leans over and confides: in oil, even a sneeze in the Middle East can move the market. On the cultural front, oil's imprint remains everywhere. SUVs begin their rise to popularity, symbols of status and freedom, even as their gas guzzling becomes an environmental talking point. You meet a family shopping for a new vehicle, torn between practicality and the desire for power and prestige. Internationally, conflicts linked to oil flare up. The 1991 Gulf War erupts after Iraq invades Kuwait, threatening vital oil fields and global supply. You witness the tense buildup as international forces mobilize, aware that controlling oil means controlling power. The war's aftermath leaves a complex legacy: shattered infrastructure, ongoing sanctions, and a region on edge. As the decade closes, you reflect on oil's dual nature: a source of wealth and conflict, progress and peril. You lie back in bed, the faint glow of the city beyond your window a reminder that the world keeps turning, and oil keeps flowing for better or worse. You wake up in the dawn of the new millennium, a world humming with the quiet buzz of technology, but still tethered tightly to the endless flow of oil. It's the early 2000s, a time when the internet is spreading like wildfire, but beneath the glow of screens and new gadgets, the age-old dance with petroleum continues, more complicated than ever. You're standing at the edge of a sprawling refinery complex somewhere on the Gulf Coast. The sun is barely up, casting a soft orange glow over towering smokestacks, and twisting pipelines that snake through the landscape like metallic vines. The air is thick with a mix of sulfur, gasoline, and salt from the nearby ocean breeze, a scent that has become strangely familiar to millions, a marker of modern life's heartbeat. Your guide here is an engineer named Lisa, whose hair is pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, and whose eyes carry the fatigue and pride of someone who's spent years navigating this industry's wild swings. She points out a massive new processing unit, the result of billions in investment, designed to refine oil more efficiently and reduce harmful emissions. She tells you how the industry is trying to polish its image, investing heavily in cleaner technologies, even as global demand for oil keeps climbing. You ask about the social impact of all this. Lisa shrugs. We've got communities living in the shadow of these plants, some thriving on the jobs, others struggling with pollution and health issues. It's a trade-off nobody really wants, but everyone seems stuck with. As you wander through nearby neighborhoods, you notice the dichotomy. Well-kept homes next to run-down trailers, children playing in yards shaded by oil tanks, families smelling the fumes but grateful for the paycheck. It's a world caught between progress and peril. The early 2000s also bring geopolitical upheaval. You're invited to a briefing room in Washington, D.C., where diplomats, military officials, and energy experts convene to discuss oil's role in global security. The 9/11 attacks have just reshaped priorities, and the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq loom large, often linked directly or indirectly to oil interests. Historians still debate whether these conflicts were primarily about counterterrorism or securing energy supplies. You watch footage of desert convoys, armored vehicles lumbering across sand dunes, guarded pipelines, and strategic oil fields, all under constant threat. In the meantime, the rise of China as a global economic powerhouse sends shockwaves through oil markets. You find yourself in Shanghai, watching endless traffic jams filled with new SUVs and taxis, the city's skyline shimmering with growth fueled by petroleum. China's voracious appetite for oil turns it into the world's largest importer, reshaping geopolitical balances. The U.S., once the uncontested king of oil consumption, now shares the stage with this new giant. Quirky tidbit: in an effort to reduce pollution, some Chinese cities implement odd-even license plate rules for driving. Only cars with odd or even numbers can be on the road certain days. It's a bit like a weird driving lottery, confusing but somewhat effective. Back home, you witness the rise of the hybrid car. The Toyota Prius rolls off assembly lines as a symbol of cautious optimism, a peek at a possible future where petroleum's dominance might finally wane. But skeptics snicker, calling hybrids toys for tree huggers. Meanwhile, technological advances in drilling revolutionize the industry. Hydraulic fracking, begins unlocking vast new reserves of shale oil and gas deep underground. You travel to North Dakota's Bakken Formation, where men and machines churn through rock to extract black gold from previously inaccessible places. Fracking sparks fierce debates. Environmentalists warn of groundwater contamination and earthquakes, while companies hail it as a game changer, promising energy independence. You visit a local diner where farmers, engineers, and environmental activists exchange heated arguments, echoing the national divide. Historians still argue about the long-term impacts of fracking, whether it's a bridge to cleaner energy or a delay tactic prolonging fossil fuel dependency. Socially, the oil boom brings economic benefits, but also strains small towns with rapid growth, housing shortages, and changing demographics. Quirky fact: some boom towns see a spike in karaoke bar openings, perhaps because after long shifts, everyone needs a place to let loose. Politically, oil continues to shape policies worldwide. You attend a congressional hearing where lawmakers debate subsidies for renewable energy versus fossil fuels, a tug of war reflecting broader societal tensions. The oil industry deploys vast lobbying efforts, painting itself as a pillar of national security and economic vitality. Yet whispers grow louder. Climate change can no longer be ignored, with scientific consensus warning of a warming planet largely driven by burning fossil fuels. You sit through an emotionally charged climate conference, hearing activists implore world leaders to take decisive action, while some officials hedge their bets. The decade closes with the world standing at a crossroads. Oil remains the lifeblood of modern civilization, but the cracks are widening. You're left wondering, how long can this relationship last before the costs outweigh the benefits? As you lie down to rest, the hum of distant refineries mixes with the quiet clicking of your phone, a reminder that the story of oil is far from over. You awake to the world of the 2010s, a decade defined by dizzying technological leaps, shifting geopolitics, and a growing reckoning with oil's true cost. The air carries a mixture of hope and tension, like the quiet before a storm, as the planet inches closer to a tipping point. You find yourself in Houston, Texas, the nerve center of the American oil industry, walking through gleaming corporate skyscrapers that house the heads of multinational energy giants. The lobby's marble floors and sleek glass walls reflect the confidence of an industry riding the wave of a shale revolution. Hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling have transformed the U.S. into the world's largest oil producer, challenging long-standing global hierarchies. Your guide here is Marcus, a veteran petroleum engineer with a dry wit and decades of stories. He tells you about the fracking boom, where small towns once forgotten are now bustling hubs of activity. It's like the Wild West out here, he says, but instead of cowboys, we've got geologists and truck drivers. You venture into the Bakken shale fields, where crews work around the clock, their machinery humming like mechanical beasts. The landscape, once quiet prairie, now buzzes with convoys, drilling rigs, and makeshift housing camps. You smell diesel, dust, and the occasional waft of frying bacon from a nearby diner. Quirky tidbit: some fracking sites have earned nicknames from workers: Fracktown, Shaleville, or the Black Gold Rush, adding a bit of levity to the hard labor. But with all the economic promise comes concern. Environmental groups raise alarms about water contamination, methane leaks, and increased seismic activity linked to fracking. You attend a community meeting where residents voice fears about health impacts, clashing with industry reps who promise safety and job creation. Historians still debate whether the shale boom delayed the world's transition to cleaner energy or provided a critical cushion during global market upheavals. Meanwhile, global oil prices swing wildly. The early 2010s start with high prices, but by mid-decade, a supply glut crashes the market, wiping out billions in value and shuttering drilling rigs worldwide. You watch as oil traders wrestle with geopolitical tensions, conflicts in the Middle East, sanctions on Iran, and OPEC's internal power struggles. Each move like a chess game with stakes too high to fully grasp. You find yourself in a Saudi desert palace, where decisions made behind closed doors ripple through the global economy. The kingdom grapples with balancing production cuts to prop up prices versus protecting market share, all while funding ambitious visions for economic diversification. Quirky fact: Saudi officials reportedly use camel races and falconry competitions as informal venues for oil negotiations, because sometimes a little desert sport makes diplomacy smoother. In the cultural sphere, electric cars start their slow but steady march from niche curiosity to mainstream contender. Tesla, once a fringe startup, becomes a symbol of innovation challenging oil supremacy. You visit a charging station buzzing with vehicles, the faint whir of electric motors replacing the familiar rumble of combustion engines. Yet, even as renewables gain traction, global oil consumption continues to climb, fueled by emerging economies hungry for growth. You're taken to Mumbai, where streets teem with motorcycles, rickshaws, and diesel trucks. all burning fuel to keep the city alive and vibrant. Social tensions simmer over oil's environmental costs and economic benefits. You meet activists and workers caught in this crossfire, each convinced of their side's urgency. The decade also witnesses growing public awareness of climate change, with youth-led movements demanding action. You find yourself at a rally in New York where chants for climate justice echo through the streets, challenging old energy paradigms. Politically, oil remains a linchpin. You watch as governments debate carbon pricing, subsidies, and infrastructure projects, trying to balance economic growth with environmental stewardship. Historians still argue whether the 2010s marked a turning point or just another chapter in oil's enduring saga. As the decade closes, you lie awake pondering the paradox. Oil powers the engines of modern life, yet threatens the planet's future. The hum of a distant refinery lulls you to sleep, a reminder that the story continues, complicated and unresolved. You step into the 2020s, a decade beginning under the shadow of a global pandemic that brings the world to a sudden halt. Streets once clogged with vehicles fall eerily silent. The usual hum of oil-powered engines gives way to an unexpected calm. For a brief moment, air quality improves, and the environment takes a deep, cleansing breath. You're in a bustling city where masked faces peer out from behind windows and offices switch to virtual meetings. The oil industry, like much else, stumbles as demand plunges and prices tumble to historic lows. You watch in disbelief as oil futures briefly dip into negative territory. A surreal moment when sellers essentially paid buyers to take crude off their hands. In this new landscape, the question on everyone's lips is clear. What's next for oil? You tour an abandoned gas station, graffiti covered and silent. The flickering neon sign, a ghostly reminder of the past. It's a potent symbol of an uncertain future. Yet, resilience runs deep. Oil companies pivot, investing in renewables, carbon capture, and alternative fuels. You meet a project manager overseeing a solar farm funded by a former oil giant, a hopeful sign that the industry is adapting. Quirky tidbit: some oil workers have taken up beekeeping, calling it liquid gold in a jar, a sweet contrast to the black stuff they once chased. But the decade also brings fierce debate. Governments face pressure to balance economic recovery with climate commitments. You attend a heated policy debate where voices clash over subsidies, regulations, and the pace of energy transition. Historians still argue whether the 2020s will be the turning point toward a post-oil world or simply a pause before the old rhythms resume. Geopolitics remain entangled with oil. You witness new alliances and rivalries forming around energy security, rare minerals for batteries, and the control of critical supply chains. In the social realm, communities dependent on oil jobs confront an uneasy future. You visit a town grappling with layoffs, retraining programs, and hopes for green-collar jobs. Cultural shifts accelerate. Electric vehicles surge, solar panels sprout on rooftops, and fossil fuels' cultural dominance wanes. But the transition is uneven and fraught. You catch a moment in a cafe where a group debates whether fossil fuels will be completely obsolete in their lifetime or just heavily marginalized. In the scientific arena, breakthroughs in battery technology, hydrogen fuel, and carbon sequestration offer glimpses of a cleaner horizon, but challenges remain daunting. The decade also forces reckoning with oil's social and environmental legacies, spills, pollution, and climate impacts that communities continue to suffer. You spend a reflective evening at a coastal town, watching waves lap against oil-stained rocks, nature's resilience and scars intertwined. As you prepare to rest, you feel the weight of this moment, caught between the remnants of a black gold era and the dawn of a new energy age. The distant sound of a wind turbine's slow, steady sweep replaces the roar of engines, a lullaby for the uncertain night ahead. You find yourself in the thick of the 2020s, but this time, the focus narrows to the global debate over the future of energy and a legacy of Rockefeller's oil empire. It's a world where every decision about oil is no longer just about profit or power. It's about survival, identity, and ethics. You start your journey in a university lecture hall filled with eager students studying energy policy and environmental science. The professor, an expert in energy transitions, unfolds the complex narrative of how Rockefeller's monopoly laid the groundwork for modern energy infrastructure, but also for entrenched fossil fuel dependence that is proving hard to shake. Rockefeller's shadow is long, she says, and understanding it is key to shaping our energy future. You walk the halls afterward, listening to students debate fiercely. Some argue for an immediate and total abandonment of fossil fuels, while others warn that the infrastructure and economies built around oil require a gradual shift to avoid chaos. Historians still argue whether the lasting influence of Standard Oil delayed or accelerated the world's energy evolution. Your next stop is a museum dedicated to the history of energy, where interactive exhibits trace the arc from whale oil lamps to electric vehicles. You stand before a massive oil derrick replica, a reminder of the relentless human drive to extract power from the earth. Quirky tidbit: one exhibit shows a preserved 19th century gasoline buggy, an early automobile that ran on crude oil. Shocking city folk used horses and carriages. Outside, a group of activists stage a peaceful protest, holding signs urging for justice for communities harmed by decades of oil extraction and pollution. You chat with some of them, hearing stories of environmental racism, health struggles, and calls for reparations. The social fabric around oil is tangled. You attend a town hall meeting where oil workers, environmentalists, indigenous leaders, and policymakers try to find common ground. The conversation is often fraught but hopeful. Politically, the stakes couldn't be higher. You watch international summits where oil-producing nations negotiate with consumer countries, each trying to balance economic survival with climate goals. There's a sense of urgency, but also inertia, as vested interests and geopolitical rivalries slow progress. Technologically, innovation races ahead. You tour a cutting-edge laboratory where scientists develop biofuels, green hydrogen, and carbon capture techniques that could redefine energy. But the question remains, can these innovations scale fast enough to outpace climate change? You also visit oil fields now being repurposed, some transformed into renewable energy hubs, others abandoned and slowly reclaimed by nature. It's a bittersweet sight, witnessing the tangible shift from black to green. Historians still debate how much credit or blame Rockefeller's legacy deserves for today's energy challenges. Culturally, the oil industry's image continues to evolve. Documentaries, novels, and films explore the human stories behind the black gold, from tycoons to workers, activists to scientists. You reflect on how narratives shape our collective memory and influence future choices. As you prepare to leave, you look back on the vast influence of that 19th century monopoly, how it shaped economies, environments, and societies for better and worse. The sun sets over a city skyline dotted with smokestacks and solar panels, a symbol of a world caught between past and future. You lie down with a sense of cautious optimism, knowing that the story is far from over, and the choices made now will echo for generations. The soft rustle of pages turning in a history book lulls you towards sleep, a gentle reminder that every ending is also a beginning. You drift into the late 2020s, a time when the oil industry and the world at large are navigating a fragile crossroads. The hum of change is all around you, some subtle, some thunderous, as humanity wrestles with the complex legacy of Rockefeller's oil monopoly and the urgent need for a new energy future. You begin in a quiet rural town once dominated by oil wells, now dotted with wind turbines and solar panels. The landscape tells a story of transformation, black derricks replaced by white blades slicing the sky, and sun-catching panels glinting like modern jewels. Local residents share stories of how life has changed. Jobs lost, new skills learned, and a cautious hope that their children will breathe cleaner air and inherit a healthier planet. But the transition is not without pain. You meet farmers who grapple with land use conflicts and families worried about economic uncertainty. The past and future are tangled like roots beneath their feet. Quirky tidbit: a retired oil rig worker now runs a popular food truck selling black gold coffee, named in tribute to his old profession, but brewed from local beans instead of crude oil. You move on to a sprawling urban center where electric vehicles glide silently through streets once thick with exhaust. Charging stations outnumber gas pumps, and the air smells fresher, though faint traces of fossil fuels still linger. In cafes and community centers, people debate climate policies, energy justice, and how to balance growth with sustainability. The voices are diverse: young activists, seasoned engineers, indigenous leaders, and cautious investors, all seeking common ground. Historians still argue whether the oil empire's influence can be fully undone, or if its imprint will forever shape the world's energy choices. You attend a global climate summit where leaders announce ambitious targets and new cooperative frameworks. There is applause, but also skepticism. History warns that promises alone don't solve deep-rooted problems. Technological breakthroughs continue. Advanced batteries, green hydrogen plants, and carbon capture projects show promise, but face scaling and cost hurdles. You visit a research center experimenting with direct air capture, pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, an attempt to heal the planet's wounds. Geopolitical tensions flare over rare earth minerals and energy access, reminding you that the struggle for power has simply shifted arenas. Culturally, you notice a growing nostalgia for the oil age, mingled with determination to move forward. Museums celebrate both the triumphs and tragedies of the fossil fuel era, inviting reflection and learning. As night falls, you lie under a sky slowly freed from heavy pollution, watching stars that have long been hidden. The world is not perfect, not yet, but it pulses with the possibility of renewal. You close your eyes, carrying the echoes of engines, turbines, protests, and innovations into your dreams. The final lullaby is the soft, persistent wind, a quiet promise that change, like energy, never truly rests. Now, slow your breath. Feel the weight of the day soften and drift away. The journey through oil's vast, tangled history has taken you from dark depths to bright horizons. Imagine the quiet calm of a world balancing on the cusp of transformation, gentle, patient, and full of hope. Let the imagery fade like a sunset melting into twilight. The clang of industry gives way to the whisper of leaves and the steady pulse of your own heartbeat. Remember, the story continues beyond these words, unfolding in every choice we make. Thank you for traveling this path with me. May your rest be deep and your dreams peaceful.